Right. So, good evening, guys. Let's start with a question first, right? I mean, two familiar faces, everybody has seen, right? What do you think are the similarities between a fly and Virat Kohli? Any ideas?
Both the pen, yeah.
Sorry, what's that?
So they're both pen, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But what else? I don't know about you guys, but it's very difficult for me to catch a fly, right? It's very difficult. They have too much time. Because when depending on how you interpret time, how they interpret time is different. They are able to process it faster. So when your hand is moving, they probably see it in slow motion, and they have enough time to fly away. Same with Virat Kohli as well, right? I mean, it seems like that he has enough time to even adjust to a shot. I mean, I'm not saying he's perfect, but from the looks of what he does, sometimes he has more energy than or more time than other players. It all comes down to how you perceive time, in my view, because time is something that is finite, right? I mean, it goes in a particular direction, only one way. There's no two-way, or it doesn't go back, or it can't be stretched or whatever. It's a finite thing. But how you interpret time, or how you interpret time in terms of different intervals, for example, or what you do within that particular time period can be stretched. And that's kind of what we want to talk about today. We want to talk about how energy can be managed so that what you produce or what you do with your time can be improved. Does that make sense? Now, time is finite. You can't do anything about time, right? I mean, there's only so much that you have while you are awake, from when you're sleeping to whatever, as well as the time that you're given on this earth as a human being. No matter what you believe in, we all die, right? So ultimately, that time is limited to you. What you do with that time is kind of what we want to talk about, and how you energize yourself. Simple few tricks, here and there, to try and see what can you do to get better outputs using the time that is given to you. Does that make sense? I mean, useful for everybody, right? So let's try to keep into it. First things first, this is me doing innovation sessions. Because I saw you, most of you guys, at least few weeks back. This kind of back-to-back innovation sessions for me, and this will be the last one that I do. It'll be my teams who will pick up the innovation sessions from now on. So this is my last innovation session. So my energy is kind of down. I'm trying to pick it up, right? So let's go into it. The body, the physical energy part of it. We all get exhausted, right? I mean, at the end of the day, after a physical workout or whatever, or just by spending time at office sometimes, if it's a stressful day, stretched day, where you have multiple priorities, meetings, sometimes boring meetings, sometimes frustrating arguments or whatever, the physical energy we have is finite also, and it depletes. But we are all used to the concept that, health is wealth. Everybody knows that concept, right? It's a universal truth, right? If you're unhealthy, for example, your physical energy that you can spend for doing whatever activity that you're doing will be drained. So physically staying fit is a universal truth for human beings. That's why all of us have to, at some stage in our lives, in some way or the other, find a way to stay fit. If your health is compromised, typically, you will be less productive. There are exceptional cases as well. If you take, for example, Stephen Hawking, physically almost disabled, for example, can't even move his mouth, but productive. That's how you condition your body in a way so that you can produce certain energy. You can focus that energy. We'll talk about that some down the line, right? So what do you do for physical energy? Do you know there's close to 40 trillion cells in your body? Just think about the number. I actually put that number there as well, according to different estimates, right? I mean, there's no one figure. A cell is, I don't know whether you guys remember your O-level science. A cell is a little bit of a universe in its own, right? There are little, energy producing facilities, there are transportation facilities, there are different multiple components that work together. They all need energy and they need to be upkept. You can't, like, a cell has a specific time value or time function. After the its use, it drops off or it dies off. Right. So a body is a machine, right? If you think about, if you look at a cell, if you go back to your 11th grade science class, science lesson about the cell, it's actually a machine. It needs energy, it needs inputs, it needs oxygen and various other material coming from outside. It has a function where it performs different functions and it has to be kept maintained, for example. So your body kind of is going through this whole rigor. Whenever you exert your energy, when you do physical things, when you do mental muscle, like say for example they say your brain is also a muscle, right? You can train it, for example. So in a way you're using your energy throughout the day, whatever energy, in either form of the physical energy that you put in or the mental energy that you have in your body, for example. And if you don't upkeep it, if you don't look after it, if you don't condition it, the chance is it will drain out very fast. Now, for example, we all have different strengths and weaknesses, right? Not everybody's body is similar, unless you are an identical twin, I suppose. Your body will be different to one another. Now, Usain Bolt, for example, do you know his lungs have extra capacity, for example, so that his oxygen intake is, compared to other athletes, for example, compared to you and me, his oxygen intake is faster. Plus his legs are longer and he has conditioned it in such a way, of course. But he has a physical characteristics built for speed, for example. So some of us, for example, have that same characteristics, right? Different body types, different condition, different chemical compositions, different ways. A sumo wrestler, for example, you can't say that he's unhealthy, but his body type is different, for example. So you have to figure out what your body type is and what works for you. How do you keep it maintained? Because we are all young, right? Including Shirani in the back, very young, right? So in that context, obviously you have to figure out where you are in your body with regards to physical energy. Because physical energy is where it all starts. If your chips are down, if you don't have physical energy to climb a few stairs, for example, the chance is you will not be able to focus on what you're expected to do. You will not be feeling good about it, right? That leads us to, how do you condition it? One of the things about physical energy is that it has something called the Ultradian Rhythms. Have you guys noticed after about 90, typically it's around 90 minutes to 120 minutes, that's within about 1.5 hours to 1 hour. If you're doing something continuously, your body actually goes through from high energy to low energy. That's a physical thing. When you start yawning, for example, you will start stretching your hands and trying to get some energy back into you. Does that happen to you? Am I making sense? It's actually a physical concept. It's actually something that happens in your body, which it goes through a particular cycle from high energy to low energy. So that happens to everybody. How do you get out of it? You have to take intermittent breaks. Now again, this might not be popular with some of the managers if everybody starts going out and saying Ultradian cycle is here, I have to go and take a break for 1 hour and come back. This is not the intermittent breaks I'm talking about. My own teams will use this against me otherwise. What I'm talking about here is quality time, quality break. It's not the duration of the break that matters, it's the quality of that break that matters. Now again, some people will say, look, Nirmal, are you doing all of this? Are you doing all of these things, conditioning, keeping, exercises? Actually not. So am I talking a bit of Vadibana? Yes. So that's how it is, that's how life works, right? Now, I smoke, for example, but every time I get somebody to get advice or whatever, I tell them not to smoke. Because smoking is bad for you. So similarly here also, I might not be doing all of this, but I'm telling you this works. Because in different stages in my life, I've done some of it and hopefully pick up some of the other stuff as well. So in this case also, I'm saying take intermittent breaks because your focus and your energy will actually get boosted. They found out that when you're rested, when your energy, your physical energy is back to that cycle, when you recycle through, if it back at that peak, your productivity improves drastically. So you might actually do more work than trying to push through, hours and hours of mundane, boring work. If you take a break, come back and, re-energize yourself and come back and start doing it again, you might actually finish it faster. It's a proven concept. So in that context, think about the breaks that you take, but not the duration, not the length, but how do you do a quality one. Have you guys heard about this left brain, right brain concept? Most of you guys have, right? It's kind of established as maybe not as a theory, but as a fact in a way that your left brain tends to, do more logical type of work, more thinking, more decision making, that sort of work. Whereas your right brain is more creative, more emotional, more sees the bigger picture, for example. If you're working in your work environment, whether you're a software engineer, QE, or wherever you are, most of the time you'll be using your left brain because you're doing logical type of work, right? I mean, writing code, for example, is a logical operation. There'll be some creativity involved as well. So these things work in unison, but at the same time, the main focus will be on the left brain, for example. But if you are a left brain person, you might not you might not see the bigger picture across the board. So that's why there has to be a good balance between left and right. That's what gives you that energy to kind of, focus on a bigger picture, not just focus on the routine work that you're doing right now. So that's why they say, for example, if you're feeling low energy, for example, go and take a walk. When you're walking, for example, your left brain kind of shuts down because there's no thinking to be done. Walking is a very straightforward activity, right? There's no thinking involved to walk. But your right brain gets activated, for example. So then you might see a bigger picture, bigger way of, boosting your energy or seeing your life in a more detail, for example, in a creative sort of manner. So that's why they say if you take a break, if you walk, for example, your creative energy will be boosted. One of the tricks of taking a quality break when your chips are down in terms of your physical energy. We move into emotion. Emotion is also very important, right? I mean, we go through all these different emotions during a work day, typically. You get angry, you get, happy, you have conflicts, you have dull sort of periods, all sorts of different emotions. We are all emotional beings, right? At least most of us. So emotions play a huge role in terms of energy, guys, because it's the quality of energy. If you're sad, if you're disappointed, if you are angry, do you think you will do creative work? Will you have the energy or that, be able to, do something creative, for example? No, right? I mean, it's obvious sense. If you're having so many emotional problems in your head, naturally your productivity will be going down. It's a proven fact. So how do you get out of it? How do you figure out, what emotions and how do you deal with it, for example? Few things that I can point out. One is being aware of what your emotions are is very important. Some people have very difficult times when it comes to understanding your own emotions. Whether I'm angry, whether I am sad, whether I am happy, whether I am content. Sometimes it's very difficult to say, right? I mean, in day-to-day life, you don't actually analyze what you're feeling. One of the things that you have to try and do, of course, is try and see during a typical day, for example, what kind of emotions do I go through? In the morning, how do I feel? In the evening, how do I feel? In the morning, for example, I feel sleepy, usually. So that is something that I'm aware of. Something that you can actually factor into your equation of how you boost the energy or what are the problems that you will face, for example, when it comes to energy. There's something called fight or flight mode. Do you guys know about this? We are all chemical beings, right? Why do I say that? Is anybody here who thinks we are not actually chemical beings? Anybody thinks that we are not chemical? I mean, our emotions, everything is triggered into chemical receptors. It's an interesting question. I mean, there's no right or wrong answer, unfortunately. But the fact is there's a lot of things that shows that, if something chemical goes wrong, for example, that has a direct link to our emotions. I'll tell you an example. If somebody doesn't believe that there's a chemical, reaction or whatever, I suggest them to maybe go and put let's say a pill of ecstasy. Now don't go and do that. You take a pill of ecstasy, you will feel euphoria. It's a chemical that you're ingesting, right? And because of that chemical, you will feel happy. Proven fact. That's how we are, right? Hormones, for example, well, again, I mean, females, don't get me the wrong way. Depending on cycles of how hormones work, our emotions change. Proven fact, right? So we are chemical beings. So in that context, there's something called the fight or flight mode, which is if your adrenaline, or I can't remember the exact hormone, but let's say you're confronted with a big fear or whatever, all of a sudden, there is a fight or flight response, and that's a negative response usually. Because fighting or fleeing away is both negative in a way, right? Most of the times these negative thoughts fit into this particular mode. It's all chemical again maybe, but it's something that you might be able to control, the fight or the flight mode, if you are aware that this is happening to you. Does that make sense? So something that you have to work on your own, guys. I mean, this again, there's no tricks and shortcuts for this. Understanding what emotions that you go through and which situations trigger it, right? Very important. Some tricks that you can do, particular exercise that I also try and do myself, is something called the 3-lens exercise. When you are confronted with an emotional problem, you put it through 3 different lenses. Very simple, straightforward matter. Now I'll tell you an example. Just yesterday, during a particular discussion, somebody who is really important in terms of, whose sentiment is very important to me, made a question about one of my team's output over the last 1.5 years, for example, right? As to whether have they achieved what they set out to do. For example, that was a question. It gave me a very negative emotion, simply because we have done solid work, and the fact that it might not be visible outside gave me a bit of grief. It was an emotion. I was affected by it. Then I came back, I put these 3 lenses on. I tried to see from the first lens, reverse lens, what was his perspective? What was he actually talking about? Where is he coming from? Try to reverse work out, I understood that I had an emotion, right? So stay with me, right? I try to reverse it and see where is he coming from? What is that, that triggered him to say this, for example, right? And then the second one is, how will I most likely view the situation in 6 months down the line? In the long run, do I really care? Right? That's particular sentiment, shall I leave it as it is, or 6 months down the line, am I going to regret not doing anything about it? For example, I'm just talking about a particular example that happened to me, right? That is, in terms of longer term, that emotion, how do I feel about it? Then the third one is, of course, regardless of the outcome of the issue, how can I grow and learn from it? Immediately came back, I spoke to a couple of guys and said, look, there is a great opportunity here now to actually drop a mail saying these are the things that we've done over the last year and a half, because we actually have done some solid work. Now, because of that negative sentiment and emotion, I have an opportunity to go and reflect upon what I have done. Does that make sense? So I had a negative emotion, bad experience. I put it through these 3 steps as to why is it coming from, how would I feel about it 6 months down the line if I don't do anything about it, and then figured out there's a massive opportunity here as well to actually reflect upon what we have done. So likewise, in your context also, this is not a straightforward exercise. You have to think about these 3 lenses when you have a negative emotion affecting you. Just think about it. It might actually help you, right? Just a suggestion again. Since we are running out of time, the last 2, the mind. Now we looked at the physical body, we looked at the emotion, but we want to look at mind separately, right? Mind is a strange beast, right? I mean, nobody has been able to explain what mind is. If you think about it, it's one of the most unique things in the universe. There's nothing like it. We have no idea what it is. Can anybody say what mind is? No. I hope not. If you are, you're a prophet, in my view. Because it's very difficult to explain. What is mind? Is it physical matter that we are made out of? Is it some electrochemical, whatever activity that is going on? Or is it some dimension that we don't completely understand as of now? It's very difficult to explain. One of the only people who have tried it and maybe made some sense out of it is Lord Buddha, right? He has spent a lot of effort trying to understand what mind is, and some of his essence of what he is trying to say is captured in Dhammapada in a verse called Chittavagga. Anybody has heard about this? No? I'm also not a religious person. I had to ask a few people and finally managed to Google it and dig it up, right? I'm sure some of you have heard about this particular term, Dura Gamang Ekacharang, something like that. No, there's some verse like that, right? So I tried to bring down two verses from it, which tries to explain what the mind is. It says, this is the translation, of course, quivering, wavering, hard to guard, to hold in check the mind. It's hard to, see, now you are sitting here, are you really here? Your mind is wandering, right, from various things, the work that you've been doing, the tea you just had, maybe the people that is around you. Your mind is a beast. It just wavers all over the place. And mind, the second one says, for example, it goes alone. You can't take somebody else's mind along with you. You can't, right? Your mind is yours. One of the only things that is yours. You are the only one that can control it. Nobody else can help you to do this, right? That's what Lord Buddha says. And the last one says, even if you are able to control it, you can even defeat Mara. Not the local Mara, the Maraya Mara, the death, basically, right? So that's the idea. So the Lord Buddha thought, mind is a unique, entity. If you can control it, if you know what's going on in your mind, if you can focus it, that's where the real energy is. That's kind of the essence, right? I mean, even if you think about it now, for example, if you're really paying attention to what I'm saying, if your mind is focused only, that will actually sink in. But right now, if you're thinking about, oh, here, what the hell, what is he talking about? Or if your mind is wandering into other areas, your focus is not there. Your energy is not there, although your physical energy and your time is here. Does that make sense? So that's why it's important you try and focus. How do you do this? A particular study found out that when you shift your attention between different things, this is something that we all go through, right? I mean, you start some work, somebody comes with a question, or an email just starts popping up, a Slack message pops up, somebody is playing something on their distance, all sorts of distractions. They say if you're distracted by some of these, let's say if you're doing some work and you have something else and you go back and forth, whatever, you're losing 25% of your productivity if you're focusing only on that particular task. That's called the switching time, because your mind has to switch between different things. True, we talk about multitasking, we are a multitasking brain, and some people are good at it, some people are not so good at it. But the fact is, if you're doing multiple things at the same time, your focus will be diluted, right? I mean, there's only limited focus that you have. And if you are not really capable of switching quickly, your productivity will drastically go down. That's a proven fact. I mean, I don't have to say this to you guys, right? I mean, how many of you know if you have too many questions coming, people walking in, asking questions, your work and your productivity suffers. No question about it. It's not something that I have to say. This is actual fact. So how do you come out of it? Or how do you, figure out, what can you do about it? True, in a work environment like ours, like we have open office concept and all of that, so you can see even the gossip that is happening at the other corner of the office, right? Unfortunately or fortunately, we are very open office sort of concept. So in that context, it's easy to have distractions, right? Easy to have distractions. Somebody walk, across the room or whatever, distraction, right? Happens. So distractions are there. You can't avoid it. What you can maybe do is to try and ritualize some of these things so that you don't minimize the distractions. For example, let's say it's a proven fact that, let's say you have to write a report or whatever. If you isolate yourself, go and find a room somewhere without any distractions and sit down and try to do it, you will finish it faster than doing it in a corner somewhere. I've seen a lot of people, again, there's no universal truth to any of this in my view, because I've seen enough and more people sitting in different corners doing work. I'm sure they're productive at the end of the day with all the distractions also. There may be capable people like that. But at the same time, if you avoid distractions, you might actually do more. So we are combining these three together, right? Think about it. We have the physical conditioning, the exercises and the breaks that you're taking. Your emotions are in check, for example, and then separately your mind is focused because there's less distractions. So far with me? 3 simple key things that will give you better productivity for sure. Very straightforward, nothing to argue, right? So what do you do about it? Become aware of your distractions. It's easy, right? Sometimes you can just figure out what distracts me. Some people, if there's a message pending on the Slack or whatever, some notification, you're distracted. Does it make sense? Email dings, you have to read it. Sometimes those are bad or behaviors that actually you have put in place. Maybe you can ritualize it to say, okay, I'm going to check my email only every half an hour. Because email is not something that is critically urgent to be replied, right? Usually email necessarily means that, it's a message, it's there. Until you read it, it's there. It's not like a phone call, for example. So if you ritualize it and say, I'm going to check my email every half an hour and then respond to it and then move on to the other work, maybe that distraction can be avoided. So figuring out those distractions, figure out a set of rituals to avoid distractions and focus on something called systematic activities. That is, on the previous day, for example, you question before you go to bed or whatever, you understand by tomorrow what is the most critical thing that I have to do. And you come to office and you start with that. Maybe not as straightforward as it is, but sometimes you have to other things that you have to attend. But what I'm saying is, if you think about it, you might actually go and do that, finish that priority task, and then move into any other distractions. So that is one thing that I can suggest to you. Last bit, the human spirit. Human spirit, guys, is again something that is not, that can't be replicated, right? There are enough and more stories in our past, in our present, of people just purely based on human spirit has overcome odds that you can't even define, you can't even understand. When I was a kid, I read this story about, it's a real story actually, you can go and Google it if you want, of a guy called Alexei Meresyev. Have you heard about this guy? It's in a book written by somebody called Boris Playboy. Name of the story is the story of a real man. Anybody read it? No. Very disappointed. You have, right? It's one of the books, when I was growing up, for example, I had a Sinhalese translation. I used to read it, I have read it maybe about 30 times, right? It's a real story about a pilot during Second World War who got shot down by the Germans and lost both of his legs. Both legs were cut off. He had to wear prosthetics or artificial legs, right? And I'm talking about the 1940s. Those days, the legs were made out of wood, not these fancy plastic, prosthetic legs that are better than maybe real ones now, right? Those were made out of wood. It's a story about how he overcame all these other, this particular loss, and finally again was able to fly as a fighter pilot. Imagine this, right? During Second World War. Now, if you have bad eyesight, for example, you don't get a driving license. You can't drive a vehicle, no? Imagine driving or riding or basically piloting a fighter aircraft without your legs, with wooden legs. He did it purely on his human spirit. He never gave up. His courage was such that every time he was shot down by different people saying, you will never fly, he used it as a strength. Did exercise, went through a lot of pain and suffering and or people shutting him down, but finally overcame all of that, became a fighter pilot and was awarded. He actually shot down about 23 German planes or something during the end of the war, or the last stages of the war, and became awarded the hero of Soviet Russia at the time. That's the highest honor that a person can get in Soviet Russia those days. It's a story worthwhile reading, guys. I have the book. If anybody is interested, let me know. I can actually give that book to you. Beautifully written as well. So it's another example. I'm sure you guys have heard about such stories, right? People overcoming cancer, people overcoming such odds against them. It's all based on the human spirit, the strength of the human spirit, and you have it as well. Every one of us has that gift, right? So how do you use it? It'll be great if somebody like Neo, I mean, you guys know Neo, right? Everybody has watched Matrix. If somebody comes and says, hey, this is your purpose of your life, how awesome could that be? Because I don't know about you, I don't know the purpose of life. I don't know why we are here. All I know is we are here and we are the only conscious being here, nobody else. So this question is there in everybody's head, in my view, as to why we are here. What is the purpose of our existence? Not at a spiritual level. Think about your own physical, operational level. Why are you here in this company, for example? Why have you gone to university and done whatever you have done, for example? There are different purposes in life that you have gone through, right? So understanding some of those purpose of life for you is something that you can turn into energy. You can use it as a strength. You can use it as an energy to drive yourself. There's a lot of power in there, to be honest, if you can tap into it. So how do you do that? You have to obviously figure out, you have to do what you like doing, right? Basic stuff. If they say, no, if you're passionate about something, if you really, do you know the word, Sinhalese word for passion? I think I have said this here as well some time back. What is the Sinhalese word for passion? The passion doesn't really cut it. Any ideas? Sinhalese word for passion? No? M තියෙන්න ඕනේ. You know, if you are passionate about something, M කරනවා නම්, if you are really you're going to really do it, right? Passion plays a huge role. So understand what you're passionate about. What do you do? What do you enjoy when you're doing something? One of the exercises that you can do is think about the last few months and think, when did I hit my sweet spot? Doing what? Think about 2-3 things that you felt really good doing. Either work or play or building human relationships or whatever that you felt really good, that really gave you that focus, that sweet spot. Think about it, reflect on it, and then consciously allocate time to do it. Consciously do it, not circumstantially. Consciously you say half an hour, let's say somebody thinks, okay, I like playing music, something that gives me a lot of pleasure when you reflect back. Find an half an hour each day, for example, to do it. Ritualize it. That's what they say. There's a lot of energy that you can tap into when you do that, because your other aspects like emotions, your physical energy, all of that gets renewed when your human spirit is in good condition. A true fact, right? I mean, we experience that, right? Sometimes when we have 3-4 days of really hard work, but something really works out there at the end of the day, the results come through, you feel energized, don't you? Right? So, very important. And living your core values. Don't compromise your core values. That's what it says. Sometimes we are asked to do things that we don't really like doing. It goes against your core values. So it's important that you try and stick to your core values, because that's what defines you. That's what gives you your purpose in life. Right. That's it. Right on time. If there are any questions, anything, I'm more than free to give any suggestions that I have. As I wanted to say earlier also, I am not a sage, I am not a priest or anything, so my knowledge about philosophy and all of that is something that belongs to me. So anything if I put down here, it's based on my experiences. So it can be different to you. You have to figure out your own energy. Well, how can I tap into it? And once you do, you will fly, no question about it. Doesn't matter whether you're a software engineer, whether you are working as a janitor, it doesn't matter. You will be at best at it because you have tapped into your inner energy, right? Thank you very much.